Excellent. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. This is the Wednesday, January 28th, 2026 meeting of the City of Somerville Community Preservation Committee. I'm Ryan Kirchhoff, the chair. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee will be conducted via remote participation. We will have a video recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. Roberta, could you please call the roll?
Yeah. Um, I'm going to call in the order that I see you on the screen. John,
Here.
Michael,
Here.
Ryan,
Present.
Rona,
Here.
Mary Jo,
Here.
David Turin,
Here.
and Joe Capuano. We can't hear you, Joe, if you said present.
Hello.
Hi, Eric. We were just calling the roll.
Oh,
So you're next, Eric.
I'm apparently here. Just had to go through two laptops and a phone to get on this meeting.
Uh,
If I log in
Glad,
again,
glad you made
yes,
it.
I'm here.
Thank you. And I see Carlos just joined us. Carlos, when you're able to unmute, we're calling the roll.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you for that. And sorry, I'm actually on the way home, but I'll be turning my camera on soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Is everybody, Roberta?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And wanted to wish a welcome to Rona, who is in her first meeting here. Rona, if you want to introduce yourself briefly, that'd be great.
Well, thanks all of you for having me. I guess what I bring here is a combination of a 30-something year career in residential real estate, which was preceded by a 13-ish so year career in deafblind rehab. So accessibility, affordability, and sort of house geek is predominantly what I bring. And I live in West Somerville, and thank you.
Very good. Welcome. Thanks for being
Welcome,
here.
Rona. Hi there.
All right. First matter of business, don't see it on the agenda, but would love to approve. Oh, we have approval of the minutes at the very end.
Yeah.
I guess we can put that off for a bit. So with that, our next item on here is to hear our diagnostic report related to historic preservation. So Roberta, any preamble you want to offer here?
Sure. So we do have with us the consultants from Community Preservation Associates, right? Or
Partners.
partners. Thank you. I just didn't have the word at the tip of my tongue. I should let you all introduce yourselves, but for the benefit of um, committee members to refresh your memory, we hired consultants to help us with a review of our historic preservation program guidelines. And a diagnostic report and some preliminary recommendations were included in your meeting packet. And I will let you take over and explain.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna try to share my screen. Just send a request.
Yep, got that.
Wonderful. My cat's jumping up at the best time. She loves to do that. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So, thank you all so much for inviting us to present tonight. We're excited to be here. It's been such a great experience so far working with you all, and we're really excited to move this project forward tonight. So, as Roberta mentioned, our goal this evening is to go over our key findings from the diagnostic report, which you should have all received. We know it's a substantial document, so we want to thank you for any time that you take reviewing it. We won't go over it tonight page by page, just rather hit on key themes and patterns that emerge throughout our review. So, as a reminder, the diagnostic report was a culmination of phase one of our contract, and we've already begun working on phase two, So we know you all are hoping to include some of our recommendations in this year's grant agreements. So we wanted to get a head start on some of the more time-sensitive aspects of the work. So we have prepared some draft conditions for the historic preservation grant agreements that we'll also be presenting and discussing with you all tonight. With that being said, we know there's a lot to get to, so we'll try to keep the presentation pretty short and leave plenty of time for discussion. Um, so as I mentioned, today's goals, we're going to summarize the key findings from the diagnostic report, including key areas of concern and opportunity. We'll preview phase two, and we'll be talking about a few different aspects of phase two, like the draft conditions. And just Roberta kind of gave this background, but just really quickly, as a reminder why we're here, we were engaged by the city to develop comprehensive CPA historic preservation guidelines that protect the city's historic resources, comply with statutory and regulatory requirements, and maximize community value, all while keeping the program consistent, transparent, and approachable. So specifically, we were tasked with evaluating alternatives for protection mechanisms, developing guidelines for a small grant program for residential properties, recommending procedures for monitoring existing preservation restrictions, and evaluating feasible approaches to public access and securing public benefit for properties receiving CPA funds.
Hi, I'm Courtney Whalen. I'm one of the three founders of Community Preservation Partners, and I will take over from Rachel at this point. So the role of the diagnostic report, as you can see, that is the report off to the side. It's available PDF, and I think we've got it linked as well if anybody wants to go through it more specifically than we do tonight. So we documented the current conditions of the historic preservation practices of your CPA program. And in that, we identified different challenges, some gaps, some inconsistencies, and some opportunities because it is a great program. We also provide an initial landscape of potential approaches and alternatives as well. So it's important to note here that we are following the scope that was in the RFP. Because of the type of questions that we asked, we got a lot of information. We did include that information. We're going to go forward in phase two with that, which is specified with the RFP, which Rachel did already go over. If need be, in the future, we could expand on those other things that came up, which, you know, us liking CPA and problem solving, we did enjoy getting that feedback and going through some ideas. So we're focusing tonight on just the phase two aspects. So let's talk about our methodology. We had kickoff and introductory meetings. We had neighborhood tours that allowed some really great context as we reviewed other documents and reviewed the program. We spoke with different stakeholders through interviews, and we did comparative research from other communities with CPA and how they do their historic preservation grant programs.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jillian.
Sorry about that, Courtney. Hi, everyone. I'm Jillian Lang. I'm the third member of the CPP team, and I'm just going to start off with the key findings. So overall, you'll not be surprised to hear that the program is really strong and community-centered and widely trusted. But we wanted to go over some of the challenges that we did stumble upon here, so we'll go over those now. The program structure. So CPA is inherently, the guidelines are inherently complicated, but and the guidelines that are in place, they function, but we wanted to they needed some tweaks, some clarity for some of the more complicated projects. There are sort of administrative and capacity constraints that limit scalability, and the reporting process may need to be sort of beefed up as annual updates are, they might be too infrequent to catch certain issues. So the application process, Procedural complexity is a barrier to first-time or small-scale applicants. The sheer volume of information can be overwhelming, especially for those that are new to the process. And they might overlook critical components because it's just a huge amount of information. There is sometimes an over-reliance on a very, very competent and really well thought of CPA manager for one-on-one support. And there's there's limited technical assistance beyond that CPA manager's capacity. So those were some of the things we were looking at in that application process. And funding priorities. So the vague historic preservation funding priorities and goals beyond general CPA funding priorities were one sort of key finding that we were stumbling upon, and competing demands between larger institutional or city-owned projects and smaller neighborhood scale efforts.
Next, we'll get into protection mechanisms. So right now there's a requirement for a preservation restriction for all projects. Won't come as a surprise. This is not always feasible or proportional to the scale of the project. It can create a lot of roadblocks to recording the PRs, and it can even be a non-starter for some applicants. Also, of course, one of the reasons we're here, there's lack of a formalized monitoring procedure for recorded PRs. And we truly think there's a need for scalable, flexible menu of protection tools. In terms of public benefit and public access, there's currently no consistent framework for evaluating or documenting access requirements post-grant award, and there is a variable interpretation of public benefit, particularly for projects that make interior improvements, and we will get to this a little more later on in the presentation. For funding private homes and or small businesses, there are currently a lot of barriers to participation, and there's also just a perception of infeasibility from the applicant side, due in large part to the permanent preservation restriction requirement. And then there's just the absence of a formal policy regarding the eligibility of utilizing these funds for such projects. And these projects would have a disproportionate administrative burden relative to their funding amount. So again, this is why we're looking towards doing a small grant program instead of treating these as individual grants. And there, again, is limited staff and admin capacity for something like this. And with compliance, post-award compliance and oversight mechanisms, once a grant is completed, it's not fully institutionalized, so there aren't there are limited standardized tracking systems for monitoring such things as restriction compliance, public access agreements, or maintenance agreements long term. And there's an absence of, going in the future, once a project is completed, of periodic audits or site reviews to confirm that they're still adhering to grant conditions.
Preliminary recommendations from us for you all, and these are what we are going to advance our work on in phase 2. So protection mechanisms. Protection mechanisms serve the purpose of protecting the investment of the city, the investment of the historic resource, and making sure the public benefit has been met. We are suggesting a menu of protection items, and we are leaning strongly towards recommending a tiered clawback provision, which offers a time-limited protection, clear and enforceable compliance pathways. It's better alignment with smaller grants and private properties. It reduces the administrative burden, and it is a stronger applicant willingness to participate because it doesn't include a preservation restriction. That doesn't say that preservation restrictions don't have their place in your toolbox for when you're awarding, but by large, this is going to create more applicants, and it will be a more flexible but strong protection option for the city. And then public benefit. We bang on about public benefit to no end because of the anti-aid amendment. So it's a government money going out has to have a public benefit in it. So it's important to consider public benefit and to basically define what you would like to do with it. So we recommend that the committee define what public benefit is clearly. Is that public visibility of improvements enough that you have preserved the building? That is the public benefit. Or is there also going to need to be an interior use and interior access required as well? If you, the committee, decide that the interior access is required, we will continue and we will consider potential access approaches, including scheduled public entry, programming, or other arrangements, and identify types of agreements or conditions, so access commitments, programmatic obligations, etc., that can secure intended public benefit. And oops, sorry, let me just move on. So preliminary recommendation as well for the small grant program that Rachel had mentioned for private residences. So it would be a structured partnership with the Somerville Home Improvement Program, which is great and already exists. So it's leveraging that existing system. So it reduces duplication of effort and increases the capacity of support for homeowners effectively. And a successful partnership will require defined roles both within the CPA staff, the Historic Commission, and the HIP program. So preservation restriction monitoring, we will develop a clear procedure for monitoring the PRs that are in place. We'll create a centralized inventory of existing PRs, standard monitoring protocol, communication templates and tools with those that have preservation restrictions on their properties, and defined roles and internal workflow of who's doing what and to whom the information goes to.
All right, and we did mention that in our diagnostic, we kind of uh, were coming across things that were out of scope, but we still wanted to include in the report for the committee's benefit and to just kind of give an like holistic view of the program. So we have here some recommendations for future consideration that we won't be advancing in phase two, and there's a lot more detail on these in the diagnostic itself. But some options, for future consideration by the committee to strengthen internal administrative capacity and support, expand outreach and program visibility, clarify application expectations, and provide more robust applicant support, clarify and communicate historic preservation funding priorities more clearly, develop a compliance and long-term stewardship system for all projects, not just in terms of the PR, and expand the program through other small grant programs, such as for small businesses or for cultural and artistic uses. And our phase two tasks that we will be advancing. So number one is establish conditions for grants, including protection mechanisms, and clarify the city's policies for public benefit and public access, particularly institutionally owned buildings that receive funds for internal improvements. So both of these things we have already started our work on, and we'll go into more detail later in the presentation. We'll also be providing procedures for preservation restriction monitoring and compliance, and creating guidelines for that small grant program. So at this point in the presentation, we're kind of switching over from phase one to phase two. And I want to ask you all if we want to pause here and discuss the diagnostic and then go on to the phase two work, or if you want us to just keep going and we can just open it up for a broad discussion in the end.
I had a quick question, and I don't want to throw you off if it's out of order and you're going to maybe tackle it later. But when you were talking about private residence, and in my mind, I'm thinking, single family or something like that. But is there a different approach when residential condo association is the entity, multifamily in a historic building? We had one of those happen for the first time last cycle, and it felt a little different. Maybe for some of us, it's a little different than a house. And have in your experience, is that something that gets handled uniquely?
Yes, I think definitely, especially for the project that you're talking about, with it being an affordable housing and historic preservation project, right? Like that.
I'm
think,
sorry. I don't mean to
oh,
interrupt you. Not affordable. Market rate.
Oh, this is oh yes, yes. So we were thinking of using the existing infrastructure that the home improvement program already has, which I'm not sure off the top of my head if they also do condo associations or if it's more like single family that we haven't like dove into this program yet. But I think typically what I think my gut reaction and what we kind of have been talking about is yes, that would be treated differently because it's a lot more complex when you have multiple owners and it's just a lot more simple when there's just one owner and we can kind of piggyback off the existing infrastructure. Courtney and Jillian, I don't know if you have more to add.
Yeah, I can just add very quickly too, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but just it also comes down to how you think about public benefit, right? So if you're thinking about public benefit as being that it's just on the exterior, that it is like beautifying the neighborhood, then we think about that. Then as long as it is on the exterior facade, front facing part of the building, then it would be okay. But we'll get back more into that more. It does sort of get into some of those bigger discussions that we're going to be getting into in phase two.
Awesome.
And
Thanks. Go ahead.
I'll just add to that as well for the particular situation that you're bringing up is whether or not you want to do it will be your decision. We'll have things set up in the toolbox for you so you can balance your decision with safeguards. But if it's a decision of whether or not you ought to or ought not to fund them, it's our experience that oftentimes it can be helpful to not compare what is more historic than another or what has more public benefit than another. Those requirements should be met at the application. So what you could kind of, if you wanted to kind of gnaw at a bit is access to capital. Does one project have better access to capital than another? Because there isn't a historic preservation grant program per se for the state. There are some through the Mass Historic Commission. It's a lot of the reason why CPA even happened. So if you're looking at a nonprofit going up for something versus people that might have better access to capital, that can help weigh your decision on need. If not for CPA, then will this go forward? So just to kind of close that loop on privately owned.
Understood. Okay. I think we're probably okay to just cruise on if you want, and then we can open up to broader questions at the end.
Absolutely. Great. Jillian, do you want to take it away?
Okay, so proposed conditions for historic preservation grants. I'm going to dive into the compliance for the clawback a little bit more. So we really feel that this might be a better fit for the historic preservation projects as opposed to the preservation restriction. It's more of a canned element, so you don't have to rewrite it each time for a specific scope or anything like that. There's a commitment to maintain the work that is funded for X amount of time. So for the purpose of this, we'll say 15 years. That's kind of a common one because it fits with sort of the length of sort of how long the work might be expected to stand up for. It will have an inspection element. So as the construction is happening, there will be regular inspections. And then after that, for the length of this clawback period, there will be an annual inspection. And then if there is a violation, for example, if someone is isn't keeping up the work or isn't maintaining, and after a warning and whatever, there may then a portion or 100%, 75%, 50% can be taken back by the city based on how long it's been in place. So however many years it's been since the grant agreement was in place. So we also put in we're recommending a requirement to commence work just so that the money doesn't sit. So the grantee acknowledges that it is required to commence work under the agreement in a timely period. So keeping things moving, keeping the pipeline moving.
And I did want to mention this. I think we think this is a good idea to have in there anyways, but based on the committee's discussion around Buddy's Diner, this kind of popped up because and just as an example, in a lot of cases, right, CPA funding is just a piece of the pie, and you may be waiting on other funding. And it's like, okay, yeah, this project will move forward if they receive all this other funding. But if it doesn't, then we don't want CPA funds just sitting there, right? So this kind of covers that.
Yeah. And so this is also can tie in a little bit with Buddies as well, the proposed sale. So what's I think a neat feature of this is that the grantee, they have to tell the city that they are, if they're going to sell their property. And if the buyer is okay with that, then and they're okay with the means of the agreement and the maintenance agreement and the clawback, then it will be reassigned to the new owner. If there's some kind of an issue and people are not, for some reason it is not feasible, then the grants will be returned following the clawback procedure.
So public access for private properties, because we were tasked with coming up with a concept and some ideas for this, we have it here. But I think what's important to note is that we don't recommend it. We think by virtue of the meritocracy of the application in which they say what the public benefit is going to do in their words, that ought to be enough. We feel that preservation of the resource is enough. We would really like for you all to discuss that and come to a decision so that can kind of be taken care of, and it will free up administrative time and your time going forward. And it's really great messaging to applicants to be able to be on the level with that and say it is preservation enough. In terms of internal access, public access to a building, a lot of the applications that are doing things for the community so they can be accessed by the community. To force an interior access in a situation, we don't think is good on any number of fronts. One, from safety, because a lot of what is funded serves vulnerable communities. So allowing public access could have a negative effect either on children or immigrants. And then the other issue is on the grant making side, if we're taking everything one off as an interior access, that's a lot of paperwork, that's a lot of back and forth with legal. And we feel it is going to be better for the program, and it's going to be more palatable to the community to just have a baseline of what public benefit is, and that the public access is looped into what that program or that nonprofit or whomever is doing. And then specific to Buddy's Diner, this came up in your last meeting, the return of funds in the event that a third party is found responsible for payment of the work proposed in the agreement, then the CPA funds shall be reimbursed to the city. So that is if they are able to get an attorney and go after the different utility companies that put the historic resource in the situation that it is now in, and they do get their funds, and they will, this stipulation will remain that the CPA funds will be returned to Somerville. So we talked about the toolbox that you have. You can start with the clawback, which we think all grant applications should have, and you can go up to and include deed restriction options, which are there for a reason, and they can be, those decisions can be made on your risk assessment of either how much money the grant is for. Say you have a $1.5 million grant that you're making out and they want to ensure public benefit, or you want to ensure your role in this particular project. There can be the preservation restriction agreement, which by the way does meet public benefit. You can do interior access. So for instance, if there's a historic resource in town that has an interior bell, or there's a clock, a town clock, but you want interior access to get up to inspect and monitor the work there, that's an option that you can do. The interior access and the preservation restriction agreement run with the deed of the land. So it doesn't matter who buys it, that's going to be part of their, that's going to be part of their property. The covenant does also run with the deed, but it isn't done through Mass Historic Commission. That would be done within the city of Somerville and then be recorded in the county. And situations like this would also come up in the instance that a project isn't in a local historic district, or there's other mechanisms, or there's other protection mechanisms that you're unsure about. So the restrictions protect the investment and they protect the historic preservation property. And so now we're at the end of our presentation. We hope it was helpful. There was a lot of minutia to try and generalize. We encourage you to have a look at the report that we did. And in addition to the questions now, if you have questions after this, after it's kind of sat in, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear your feedback. So Roberta, I'll turn back over to you.
Thank you. I'll turn over to Ryan to manage the discussion and feedback.
Yep, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for that thorough presentation and for all the work. Very clear explanations. Really appreciate the way you walked us through those. So I have a couple questions and comments, but I'll open it up to the rest of the group first. Any committee members with questions or comments off the top?
I'd be happy to.
John, yeah, go ahead.
With you. I guess my first is not really, it's more of a recommendation. I really like the idea of the defining public benefit. I think that's something really crucial to the CPC that we should do moving forward. One thing about that was the access agreements, and that kind of just reminds me of like the city's POPs, privately owned public spaces. So it's like how we get developers to create like parks for us, and then we have these agreements which allow us onto their property and like have these access agreements. So if you guys want to talk to our department about those access agreements and like how we work with developers, we're happy to kind of have those conversations and show you some of the like legal documents and maintenance agreements that we've created with those developers. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was about the clawbacks. I think having those time frames predetermined is really important, just so kind of from two different ideas. One is just for our work, it's going to make things more efficient if we know it's either going to be a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year clawback period. The other thing is just for applicants. I think it would be scary to have this like vague, like unlike described timeline. And so just kind of having it like pre-committed so they know, okay, if I'm applying to this, I'm going to be in a 10-year clawback period. So they feel more comfortable with it before they're even applying would be kind of helpful. Those are my comments. Great presentation though. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I want to, the clawback we put in just like X amount of years for the committee's benefit with, typically there's 15 years or 20 years. We've kind of seen, and we didn't want to assume what the committee wanted to do with that, but the idea would be it's the same for each project just to keep things consistent.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. We should have clarified that we put that in for just, that's up to you, right?
Yeah, we wanted to see if you guys had an appetite for it before we put in the years, but we do have that information. And I should have said this earlier. I'm sorry. There was, that report smushing down into just like a few speaking points isn't great. Part of the issue for the clawback, which is why it's great, is that it is somewhat of an anti-development tool. Because if you have it too low, then a developer might look at it and go, I can wait that out.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are wanting to fund community projects, meaning not owned by a municipality, then when you're getting that money out into the community, it is privately owned somehow, either by a nonprofit, an institution, or whatever. That's when the anti-aid amendment has to be offset. So this helps in lieu of a preservation restriction for enough time that it puts off basically like a free loan to flip the project. Where it would be different is your project that's doing the 6 affordable housing units. That is where things would be different. But having gone through I went through their application last week. I would imagine they might be amenable to it because they would just have to kind of change their pro forma, I think. But where they're a land trust, they're a registered CDC, they are most likely going to understand that there are some things that has to happen with the government money that you're intended. So yeah, the clawbacks are great. They're a great option. They make things more flexible, especially if you have a project that's like 20 grand to fix like a window or a door, for a building that provides all kinds of great programming for the community within it. They might not have ever had that work done in their historic building if not for CPA. Going up to get a $20,000 grant with a preservation restriction is going to be a non-starter in a million different ways because it is very complicated.
Great, thank you. David, did you have a comment?
Well, I just had a quick clarification question. When you're talking about the 15 or 20 years and you had that tiered clawback, are you suggesting that it's 20 years to the 50% clawback period, or 20 years is, like there were 30 to 50,
Yeah, we were saying, so if it were, say it's 15 years, right? We'd say if there's a violation within 5 years and you have to return 100% of the funds, if there's a violation within 10 years and you have to return 50% of the funds, and if there's
Okay.
a violation within that 15 years, that is 25. Yeah. So going down from,
Yes.
yeah.
So, right. So the 15 years is the end of it.
Yeah,
not
the end of it.
beginning of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to a preservation restriction that's in perpetuity or that's 30 or 50 years. And basically the amount of work that in and of itself is going to take, plus these people's construction projects. And
Right.
the people that come up for grant money for historic preservation projects usually aren't historic preservationists. They're doing good work in the community. So having to all of a sudden learn all this minutia, it can be a bit much for people. So trying to keep that pathway for communities open is really important.
Yeah. I do like the clawback idea. I also like your suggestion that it's kind of linked to the life cycle of the improvement. That it doesn't make sense if someone's put in a window with a 20-year or 25-year life expectancy that for 100 years we're going to be trying to claw it back.
Right.
Agreed.
The other thing, and this is really kind of in the weeds, but when you gave the example of the buddies, if the third party is deemed responsible and they get their money back, I do like the idea. In fact, it was something that I think I had suggested a couple of meetings ago. But I also would like it. I would kind of think that I'd prefer it be kind of more like an open-ended thing that we would consider, that we discuss, as opposed to categorically saying, if you get your money back, you got to give it to us, because then they have no incentive to try and get their money back. If they know that if they get it back, they're going to have to immediately turn around and give it to us, why would they pursue that legal, path? So I'd kind of like to see them to have some incentive to pursue those legal options. And maybe it's some sort of a cost share or something, as opposed to them then having to give every dime back.
Interesting thought.
So it's kind of like a may instead of shall,
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, David. Rona, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a couple.
A question?
The first one Courtney's more or less answered, which was my concern about flippers and people who probably could afford to do the work and are leaning on us. And I think that's been addressed. And the other one was whenever I see timely period or that kind of vague legal language, my instinct is to nail it down. And I would suggest doing something like a year or 18 months with some kind of mechanism to ask for an extension based on legitimate things like there's co-funding that hasn't come through yet.
That
But
is actually in your grant agreement. There is language for that. We had a meeting last week, the week before last, with Kathy from legal, and she kind of liked it vaguer. She liked that a little bit more than being specific. There are options to get an extension within the grant agreement. It's been our experience sometimes that people will take advantage of the extension situation. So while we were going through the grant agreement and getting feedback from stakeholders, we thought it might be better to have it than need it clause, rather recital in the grant agreement, just in case, because there's another whole recital in the grant agreement that says that if some sort of conflict comes up, all parties are going to come to the table to try to resolve it amicably so that the project can move forward. So these are just kind of better guardrails, and in some cases, like with the clawback and then the assignment in case the property sells, it's a two-part kind of catch-all. So if it sells, what happens? You either move the project on to somebody else or you get the money back, instead of it just being an absolute deal killer and you've got a great CPA project with the sign out front, nothing's happening. So it's a way to sort of keep things moving.
Okay. And I guess the last thing is with condo associations, a lot of times there's a, if it's a big association, then there's some kind of board. So maybe nailing down how decisions are made for this process with that board or with the trustees. Just making their decision making beholden to what we want to do might clean up that condo association problem, because there's a number of historic buildings that have been broken up into condos that could benefit from this.
I would love
Roberta?
to. Thanks.
Yeah.
I would love to address that comment. So last year, maybe a project that Mary Jo had been referring to, there was a request from a condo association, and the CPC was initially inclined to award a grant to that project. But then when we got into the details of the requirement for a preservation restriction, it totally fell apart because we realized that nobody would have the authority to actually execute a grant agreement, a preservation restriction with a condo association. So we added to the application process a question asking for agreement of the condo association at the very beginning. The eligibility determination form now asks you, are you part of a condo association? If so, then your board needs to agree to these terms before you even start the process. So that's one way that we address that to try to bypass that situation happening again.
Roberta, refresh my memory. It wasn't just that they would need a board that could consent to the restriction. Wasn't it that every single condo owner would need to consent? It needed to be unanimous. So even if the board voted yes and 19 out of 20 voted yes, if one did not, then it would not be enforceable. Is my memory right on that?
Even worse than that, there was also the lender's approvals as
Yep.
well,
That's
right?
So
I think that's where
that's
we
what
were
I
kind
was
of
going to
stuck.
add too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that like level of agreement is specific to preservation restrictions. The clawback agreement, I imagine, and I'd have to get input from legal, might be sufficient for the condo association board to agree to the clawback provision. It wouldn't have to get the consent of every single property owner and their lender to be able to execute it.
And in those situations, we would recommend only exterior work seen from the public way. No interior access is just not feasible. It's not safe. It opens up the city to lawsuits. In the event that a private condo association is going to go up for historic preservation money, it would be very visible from the public way with the clawback in it. Depending on your concern about the long-term resource or turnover, then that's when that toolbox can come into play and say, actually, no, we do want a covenant. But I think inherently because of the different amount of people and the different lenders, an already occupied condo building is going to be really tough to get through. I think your other example of a 6 unit going to be permanently affordable redevelopment, that's probably your best place to really interact with residential housing.
I had one more, I guess I'd frame it as a question for the consulting team. It's my own personal hang up. Because I admire the historic buildings that are market rate condos, but I worry that if we were to ever fund exterior repair to a market rate condo building, however that might get arranged, it could be sort of a deferred maintenance that they all start to think about. Well, we don't really have to repoint the brick because there's always CPA, and am I just overthinking it? And in other communities, does it actually get funded? That was something I was worried about. And it's more with the market rate ones. That's where my head is at. Because if it's got a lot of affordable units, that's totally different. They have other challenges. But with market rate condos in a historic building, I was worried that the residents or the board, the association, might kind of put some things off because they might be able to turn to this type of funding.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd
that's where
say
your
you're,
toolbox comes in.
yeah, you're absolutely not being paranoid or thinking about it too difficult, like, or too, too much. And a lot of communities just don't fund private housing for these reasons. It's really tricky. And that's where a point Courtney made early in the presentation kind of comes in, where when you're evaluating these projects, one of the questions you have to ask is, what is their other access to funding? Like, if not for CPA, would this never happen, right? Or could they fund it themselves? And they're just trying to get the money because that absolutely is something. There's deferred maintenance for a really good reason. There's deferred maintenance because people truly can't afford to do the maintenance, right? But you don't want to run into the deferred maintenance because they're just going to wait to get a grant. So no, that's absolutely a concern.
Yeah, and it might be that, with this plan sort of in place or with the clawback that you're going to be getting a lot more applicants as well. And it might just be that these just don't rise to the top.
Well, that's something I wanted to kind of I want to pull on a little bit is I don't know that we have a need filter, or threshold in our current process. But I think that this issue makes a reasonable case that we ought to, or at least we ought to be thinking about it or talking about it.
I mean, I think in our application package, Roberta, correct me if I'm wrong, there are questions about if this funding is not available, what happens? Does this project move forward? Does it not? That to some extent is our attempt to get to need. I don't know if it's in our purview to ask for a balance sheet from a condo association. Maybe we are, I don't know to the extent that we're able to or should be reading between the lines about applicants and making assumptions. But I think that is our primary mechanism, is saying, would this project, in good faith, would this project go ahead if we weren't able to provide the funding? I know that's not a perfect way to address especially Mary Jo, I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm just trying to think of the limitations that we have based on what we're allowed to, or what it's in our purview to poke at. I don't know,
Yeah.
Roberta, any feelings or comments on that? Was that right? That's the one place where we kind of engage with the need in the application process?
Yeah, and invariably the answer to that specific question that you call out is it would never happen if we didn't get the CPA funding.
Right.
Because it
So
seems like the correct answer.
yeah, there's an obvious right answer, and they always nail it
That's
every
right.
time.
Darn it.
So I'm not. It might be that I think the committee has always used your judgment in the past to discern, is this a group of market rate condo owners, or is this a nonprofit organization that serves vulnerable families? And use that as your evaluation of
And
need.
I'm fine with that, but do we have off authority to do that? I mean, is that like kosher for us to kind of say we're putting this through our own kind of
You,
judgment whether you really deserve our money or not?
I would,
And to be clear, I just had to do the FAFSA form for my, college age son today, and I'm certainly not asking, would not want to put someone through that and tell them, you've got to tell me all, where all your money is.
Boston does it.
They do.
They ask for extensive financials.
Okay.
But
and pro formas, the whole bit.
I would say
It's
another
really
thing
fun to
that
go through when you have like 1,000 of them.
Another thing though is I keep going back to this a bit, but I mean it is the public benefit that when you're looking at a lot of applications and one project is the only public benefit is that, theoretically the threshold is that it is a historic building that is giving giving to the community by being a beautiful historic building and being that's the public benefit. But maybe you want to look at, oh, okay, maybe something is weighed more if it's has also houses a nonprofit organization, or you can kind of look at sort of there are different ways of sort of looking at need or quantifying it that way.
Yeah. So, right. So again, it goes to the depth of our, the resolution of our public benefit definition. So maybe it's not a single thing, it's a tiered thing, or it's a way for us to use it to rank projects.
So you do have evaluation criteria, and you've used them either implicitly or explicitly for as long as I've been working with you. Maybe this is a cue that we need to strengthen the evaluation criteria, maybe look at how they're articulated. That might be a summer project to work on with the committee when things slow down a little bit, so that we can have feel more comfortable with making those value judgments about what are what are the projects that meet a public benefit.
Right. And honestly, too, like it all always comes down to what are the applications in front of you that funding round? Like there may be one that if in a more competitive round probably would not get funding, but is enough, if there's just not that many more competitive projects, right?
Sort of a side question. We've talked about the small grant program. In the past, we've visualized that being something that's a little bit outside of the way we're formally evaluating all the other projects. And I know this sort of ties into preservation grants. Some communities, I know for some reason Tallahassee has one where they'll just give you money, like no questions asked. If you say we're going to go with wood windows instead of vinyl, they'll say here's a check for $10,000. Like, is there a are we visualizing that as sort of a program that's operating outside of this more extensive evaluations with fewer questions and fewer caveats and clawbacks?
So I would say at this point we haven't fully fleshed out what this program looks like, but from the get-go, we know that to do a program like this would have to be a much simpler, like the amount of work that would go into each of these projects would be like small amount of money is just not in line, with the grant itself. So it would have to be in a program that is very structured and already working with HIP and what they already do and kind of just being an extension of that. And that means that the scope is going to be really limited, right? So like from the get-go, like you can do, I'm not going to name examples at this point, but like the work is limited to this type of work, right? And the like the pool is limited to this much because Otherwise, the amount of, applications that would be coming in, right, if you just open it up broadly to all residences in Somerville. So that is like kind of the line to toe. And then right, like the preservation restriction of it all does not make sense to do. So it would be more like a clawback provision like this.
And there are a
Yeah,
lot
and I
of,
think,
oh, sorry.
well, I think cases like that, I think those only apply to properties in historic districts too, typically, not to the whole city. That's where it's like a preservation
Mhm.
funding program, rather than just the whole city can use this.
Right.
Right. You would still have to meet the thresholds for eligibility.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what you're saying is that would be something that would be really narrowly tailored to like go to wood gutters from other, and you have a maximum of $5,000 or something like that to places in historic properties, and that would be administered by the historic staff more likely, or something outside.
Yeah.
Oh,
These are all the finer details that we need to work through. We do have experience with kind of small grant programs amongst us. So it'll be interesting when we delve into the HIP program to see how it can expand, or we can fall right into place with them so that it's not administratively burdensome. Because even if it's
yeah,
a small scope and a small amount of money, it's still construction. So that,
yeah,
still going to
it
take
does
you.
have, and a program like that, even if it's small pieces, would have a good result in the marketing of historic preservation in the city too. So there is a value in the public benefit that way of kicking whatever 50 grand a year or something small. But congratulations, you're in a historic district. This is now available to you.
Right. It's a small amount of money that I think could have a very large impact. Just need to find a sustainable way for city staff to oversee something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Carlos, did you have something you wanted to weigh in on?
Yeah, thank you so much. I was actually just going to ask a little bit more about whether it would be possible to have like a clear guideline around proposed compliance period, specifically for, how many years we're envisioning and whether that should depend on the type of project.
So that would typically be so it would be the length of the clawback.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be the same. So if you want to do 15 years, then for 15 years from the completion date. So this is not including the like construction monitoring, right, that is going on. 15 years from the completion date, once a year, someone is going to go out and make sure that all the improvements are being maintained. And then after whatever that year is that aligns with the clawback and the compliance, then, do with it what you will as far as CPA is concerned.
Awesome. And my question now is like, how do we come up with that number so that we're not just like envisioning a different number for like different projects? And like, I just would want to make sure that we're doing this in the most equitable way and that we wouldn't be scaring away, like people are asking for like smaller projects, specifically like for like private properties and whatnot as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm sorry we didn't make this more clear to John's question earlier too on the same subject. We put in the X amount of years just for with the intention that the committee would decide on a standard amount of time for all projects. And typically it's 15 years or 20 years, and that's just based on the typical lifespan of a lot of these types of improvements.
And it's what other cities and towns will do too. So it's sort of kind of a standard practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said earlier, it puts off developers, and it's a good option as opposed to a preservation restriction. And we think that, we're recommending 15 years. Other towns will do 20, 25. We think 15 years is good. And that should be every single grant agreement across the board for transparency and fairness, that ought not to be tweaked based on somebody's amount, because the clawback amount is percentage. So whether you got 50,000 or 150,000, your payback period is proportional to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. My only thing now is that like for much smaller projects or like for non-bonded projects and stuff like that, like I just feel like it could feel a little like disproportionate, if that makes sense. Just because yeah, like they wouldn't be asking for that much. And they could just be put off by that a little bit more. So that's why I'm wondering, like, if you've ever had like a city or something like that, like depending on the project, have like a standard versus just like one standard that fits all.
It's typically one standard that fits all. I'm not sure of any town or city that does it based on the project. I'm not sure if Courtney or Jillian, you can think of any, but we've
No,
only, yeah. And
yeah,
again,
like
I think,
basically once
and I
that
under,
boilerplate happens, legal usually gets really comfortable with it.
yeah. And I think, and I totally understand what you're saying. And I think, the best kind of answer to that is what Courtney said, where like if they are only getting, say it's a really small grant, it's $10,000, after if something after 10 years, they're paying $2,500 back, right? So it's all in proportion to the amount that they receive.
Because we still have to offset the anti-aid amendment.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
That's a good question.
As much as you want to pull things back in order to really get out in the community, you also don't want to expose the program to a lawsuit at a Supreme Court level. So there's that line that has to be towed.
Right.
So the decisions that you make, the grants that you make have to be defensible also, so that in lieu of a preservation restriction, the clawback covers that.
Right. Thanks, Courtney. I'm going to try to steer us home in the next couple minutes here. Michael, you've had your hand up. Something you want to ask?
Yeah, so first I want to comment that I do appreciate the clarity you guys provide the presentation. I want to echo my colleagues' comments there. The thing I wanted to kind of drill in quickly before we moved on too far was looking a little bit about the clawback. I definitely can get on board with this idea, especially in lieu of having a permanent preservation requirement. I think where I'm getting a little bit stuck on this issue and where I would appreciate either guidance in the future or this evening is understanding how the inspection provision would work. For example, I would not be on board with imposing this on ISD, for example. They just do not have the bandwidth in the city right now to actually be impactful here. And so I would believe that we would be completely exposed in that instance, right? So I'd love to understand how we would address just general bandwidth of these inspections, especially if this is a successful program and we're cranking out 5 or 10 of these a year and you're starting to have, numerous projects, and also contemplating potentially some more passive inspection solutions like them reporting to us with pictures and analysis. But I'd also like to understand how we can better address these inspections with subject matter experts, right? I won't imagine that every inspection or person who could be tasked with these inspections will be capable of analyzing whether or not the repointing has been maintained, and also be capable of understanding whether or not they're doing a great job of maintaining wooden gutters, right? Those are two different skill sets, two different experts, stuff like that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more on those topics, just to make sure that this is a very strong solution to the historic preservation issue.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And a question that across Massachusetts, a lot of CPCs are running into now, just with the length of time that CPA has been around. We are getting to that point where a lot of communities are dealing with like, okay, wait, yeah, how do we kind of keep up with these projects once they're completed and gone, and how do we make sure they're doing compliance? So this is a broader question, and something that during the diagnostic, again, when we're kind of exploring the program as a whole and trying to stay in scope for what we're doing for this contract, we kept coming back to that capacity issue, right? And thinking about how do we set up systems that are reasonable and sustainable for the staff that exists now. And for something like that, with if you are keeping that compliance aspect, it is something that would probably require beefing up that admin in some way or another. It wouldn't have to be, getting another full-time staff. It could just be you hire a consultant to do this annual monitoring, and that's all it would be annual monitoring. And it is absolutely, like you mentioned, something that part of it could just be like systemized, that a Google form or whatever it is goes out to the applicant, and they fill out a lot of the information on their own, right? And then you have someone going there and checking it, right? It's not, someone gathering it all. So there are ways to make it more efficient, but it just is, matter of fact, like it does take time and expertise, as you mentioned. That's why we think if you are hiring a consultant specific for kind of these tasks who has that expertise, right? And you're not putting the administrative burden on staff.
And I'd also like to add that we never envisioned inspectional services doing this. Having a historic preservation person on staff at IISD would be like a dream come true in every city and town, I suppose. But what we're talking about here are things to strengthen your grant agreement. So there are things to strengthen your ability to interact with what you've granted money to. So a lot of these recitals that we've either kind of tweaked a little bit or added, they kind of fall under the better to have it than need it category, if you will. So it's there if you want to execute it. It's there if you want to do it. But there isn't anything there that says if the city doesn't do this, then the whole thing's canceled. It's there in case you need it. And as the program grows, so can possibly that staff, because your percentage went up. So your staffing admin percentage went up. So we kind of expect to have the same staffing level with all these other things that could be going down the way. So we're trying to set up for success and unforeseen issues that could arise now that you guys have doubled your percentage.
And it also is something to, it's something that you can set in a way, I think really ideally you're looking to make sure that someone's not tearing something out. You probably aren't going to necessarily be saying, oh, they should be, maybe they should be washing that more. I don't know, whatever it may be. Like you can decide on the bar, but it can be, you're mostly just making sure that the work is still there. And so, with a certain but you can set it however you'd like. But yeah.
And I think that's a really important point. And maybe I just read it kind of myopically. I was kind of thinking that the grantee has the obligation to maintain, the work and report to us if they don't maintain the work, and that we at our, discretion can do an inspection. Not that we need to be going out there every year or someone has to be out, and I think that it'll be largely kind of a self-monitoring sort of thing. And then if it turns out we go out there and they didn't do it, well, so I think it'll be, but I would want to make sure, like Jillian was just saying, us going out there each year and checking it doesn't, enforcement of it doesn't depend on us having done that. So it's not like they can't say, well, you didn't come out here and tell me anything. That they're under their own obligation to preserve and maintain it and tell us if anything happens.
Right.
And we enforce and we inspect at our discretion.
So this would be different than monitoring a preservation restriction, but it's similar. The language, if you really want to put yourself to sleep, if you read a preservation restriction agreement, the recitals in it, and then you double check it against the grant agreement, a lot of that is where we pulled it from and kind of played around with it. So if you have a preservation restriction on a building, that is a top to bottom, soup to nuts evaluation. If it's monitoring what the grant paid for, that really from the street, visual, photo, what's happening, is it okay? You don't want somebody throwing vinyl siding on something, boarding up a really ornate window that was paid for. So it's one sort of a proof of life, one's a fine tooth comb. And it's an ability for you to step in and say, hey, what's going on here? And then you go back to that recital where both people try to come to the table amicably to handle the situation. And if things don't go the way you want to, then you have violation, and you have language in that grant agreement to allow you to move forward with that violation.
Okay. That's a really helpful analysis. I appreciate that. And I don't want to take up any more time in our agenda that's already very full today, but do appreciate that analysis. I would love to continue this conversation a bit further. I would just say, David, you are a much more trusting person than I am when it comes to all this, but I think that's good. I think that's why we both need to be here.
But to be clear, it's not a question of trust. I actually spent a whole career doing regulatory work. And we are very clear that we go out and we inspect as often as we can, but they have an independent obligation to comply.
Yep.
And whether we've inspected or not, they have the obligation to comply.
Yep. Roberta, I just add one last thing. If we could make sure this is in the back of our head when we're starting to talk about budget again. I know we spent a lot of time talking about admin this year. I want to make sure this is a part of that conversation, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, I think we can probably let you guys go. But thank you so much for your time, for your attention, all the work, and for fielding so many good questions and comments from our group tonight. So, yeah, we look forward to working with you the rest of the engagement. And yeah, please reach out through Roberta if any other questions or info we can provide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you
This
all.
was a really, really helpful discussion for us to keep moving with this work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
Thank
Nice
you.
seeing you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you all for an engaging conversation there. All right, we have about 45 to 50 minutes, and I would love to go through a handful of our projects that are still on the docket, and maybe get some votes tonight. For folks that weren't there last month at our rescheduled meeting, we did approve a number of projects. We approved funding for 4 of them, being the Elizabeth Peabody House, the Buddy's Diner, the Grace Baptist Church, and the Kennedy School schoolyard project. So we still have 6 that are before us. And the first one on the list here is the Veterans Cemetery. The request for $306,250. Hopefully, folks in reviewing their meeting packet were able to brief themselves on the outstanding budget amounts that we have in light of the awards that were made last month. Maybe I'll pause there really quickly to see if anybody has any questions or comments related to the overall budget picture as we take on these final 6 projects for deliberation.
You're giving me way more credit than I deserve for keeping track of that.
And you could just give us the bottom line, what the number was again, that we're, without having to pull through the whole spreadsheet. If we fund everything, our reserve that we like to keep $750,000 in would be down to, what was it, 600,000 or so, I think.
Roberta, I think I saw you did update the main
Yeah, the summary.
tracker
So
page
I'll
summary. Let's do that.
I'll share the summary page with you all.
That'd be great.
So on the screen, I'm showing the summary page of your tracker, and that shows that you've already committed, including the affordable housing last July, $4.6 million. Last July was more than half of that. So it was about 2 million that you committed last month. And that leaves 2.5 million that is currently available. And what's currently requested totals 2.4 million. So the balance, if everything is funded, this column looks low. I wonder if there is something that is
Yeah, I think maybe something to do with the requests and the affordable housing lines is not adding up, because the
yeah.
applications before us tonight sum to 931,000,
Mhm.
which is close to, but not quite, the first 3 lines: open space, historic, and budgeted reserve, and the remaining requested. So yeah, we may be slightly off there, but
I think what it may be is that I might have made an assumption about your wanting to change the amount of the share of the Kennedy schoolyard that would be going to the coming out of the current year revenue instead of the bond, which I've shown a projection of what that might look like, but it's completely up to the committee if you want to pursue that in a darker green on this scenario spreadsheet.
Okay, so, but just so that we are level set, let's step back. The total funds available to our group, I would equate, and I think we did in the last meeting, as 3.726 million. That's the sum of column B, total funds available, the open space and recreation, historic preservation, budgeted reserve, and available undesignated fund balance. So that's the 3.7 that is in the purview of this group. You agree with that, Roberta? Okay. Then from there, recall we funded 1.97 million last month. That's again the sum of those same four lines in column C, 1.974. And by my math, just simple subtraction, that means we have a balance available to this group of 1.75 million, with 931,000 before us tonight. So to translate that, if we were to fund all 931,000 that are before us tonight with no changes to the Kennedy Schoolyard, no changes to the Affordable Housing Trust contribution, any of that, we would be left with a reserve for the rest of this year of approximately $830,000. Does that make sense to folks? I know kind of hard when I'm just speaking it out loud versus what's in front of us, but
yeah, I think that's exactly what it's good to know. And I know as our policy, it's when we want to keep at least 750 in the bank to cover out of cycle stuff or extreme situations next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the balance if everything is funded. But I think that this might include an assumption about the Kennedy Schoolyard. So that's not necessarily just what's on the table tonight. I should have made sure that the Kennedy Schoolyard assumption didn't carry over into this table.
Okay. Got it. All right. So any questions? I know I've ran through that pretty briefly, but point being, I think still, if we were to fund all the applications, all else equal, we would be left with just over $800,000 to get us through the rest of this fiscal year.
Yeah.
And when we say all applications, does that include the expansion of the Affordable House Fund? Or
I am not.
Okay.
I am not including that in the math that I just named.
I'm aligned.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. With that, thanks for humoring me. I always think that's important to know what's on the table before we dive in. Okay, so back to the veterans proposal for $306,250. So folks will recall that this is a multi-pronged proposal that has improvements within the cemetery on Broadway, out towards the Arlington border, as well as spot improvements and repairs to other memorials and monuments across the city. This was in our ranking when folks did the priorities back in December. This was part of a three-way tie for our fourth highest priority out of the 10 applicants. So kind of in the middle, but still important to a lot of folks. So I'll pause there. Anybody with lingering questions, comments about this one? Anybody that would not vote to fund this?
I'm trying to bring it up from the meeting packet, and the meeting packet's not loading. Is anyone else having the same trouble?
It's very slow to load.
Okay.
So Roberta, I noticed that in the budget you had a number of 69,000, which is less than the original request. Is there a little bit more context to that?
I'm gonna guess that's Roberta pulling from different buckets based upon what's available, but Roberta, correct me if I'm wrong.
Um,
So
I
I'm
have a
comparing
note.
H7, yeah, to N7.
180. Now I'm very confused because this includes 186, 250 for the monument restoration. And so I'm seeing different numbers. Oh, I see. So this is the entire amount, and that is I have you're not seeing the
Uh,
the 237. I'm looking at the recommendation letter, which doesn't reflect what is in the scenario. So I would need to make a change to the recommendation letter. The scenario shows that 237 would be, oh, I see. I didn't fill all the numbers in. So it's 237 from the undesignated fund balance plus 69,000 from the historic reserve for a total of 306,250.
So that it seems, if I may, Roberta, it seems like that's been done, assuming that we fund all other historic applications before us. This just happened to be the one where Roberta scraped the balance into this project and then took the remainder from the undesignated fund. So I don't think there's rhyme or reason for why this is the one.
Right.
That's just how it shook out.
It was just a matter of balancing, but I'm going to switch to the scenario because there's some important information that the committee might want to take into consideration that's in the scenario. If I can just remember how, stop share. And now I'm going to share the screen again and switch to the scenario. Share. So in this scenario, there's a note that the 306,250 includes 186,250 for the monument restoration, plus 120,000 for the fence. So there's some question that the committee can consider whether you want to fund the entire 306,000 or if you want to prioritize the monument restoration and not the fence.
And they said, have in my notes that they had said their top priority, if we were to prioritize within their proposal, is the cemetery on Broadway.
Yes. And specifically the monument restoration within the cemetery, the fence was a lower priority, but still a priority.
Do you recall were they going to do the fence later? I mean, is that something that they were not even going to do in the first year or two or whatever? I don't know what the time frame of any of this work was.
I imagine that if the entire project is funded, they plan to move forward with all of it at once.
Okay.
But if the committee doesn't fund the entire amount, they'll do it in phases.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember too.
No, I'm looking at their application in the spreadsheet, and they actually have the 120 for the fence in the non-CPA funded column.
Yeah, that was actually my memory as well, that they said that they were trying to get it funded elsewhere.
So
Maybe I'm
that,
wrong.
yeah, that may be something to clarify with them later. I believe that they came back and said that they were not able to find an alternative source of funding for the fence. But
Okay.
let me pull up the application as well.
And that may be fine, but then they probably should update the application, right? It's like our discussion about need.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It does say in their application, if non-CPA funding becomes available, it will be applied to secondary tasks such as fence assembly.
So, but the other thing I'm confused about from this, though, is it still says, even with the 120 in the non-CPA column, it says the requested amount is 306. So how did they get to 306 without the 120?
I believe it is 221,000 in the cemetery, and then the assortment of other monuments throughout the city plus the contingency is how they get up to the 306.
Maybe. It looks to me like 306 is the total cost, including the CPA and the non-CPA, though.
As well.
You know, I'm looking at page 7.
Yes. Well, you're right. I think that is a little confusing, isn't it? All right, we may need to seek some more information on this
Yeah,
one.
I would suggest we table this one, but
Before uh, further information to give you before you decide to table this one is that they were hoping to be able to undertake the work in time for Memorial Day, so that tabling it for another month will ensure that they will not be able to get it done for Memorial Day this year, which would be a disappointment to them. But understandably, if you have many questions about their budget, um, you know, that's your call.
I don't have a strong opinion, but would the committee be interested in funding the monument repair? And then in the meantime, we can get more information on whether or not we want to fund the rest of it.
So the monument repair, if I'm looking at their application, I'm on I think the same as David was alluding to, the application budget form. This would represent, oh man, it is very confusing the way they've done this. I'm seeing a 186,250, which would be the total amount requested less 120,000, which is that amount that they've said was for iron fence and gate assembly.
Mm-hmm.
Are people following me on that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that something folks would entertain?
I'm fine with that.
That would be all of the requested monuments within the cemetery, and then also Union Square, Milk Row Cemetery, Trum Field, East Somerville Library, with the contingency for those projects. That's how I'm reading that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And then in the meantime, if they can convince us by next month that the 120 for the fences is kosher, we could still act on that next month. But they would have gotten the approval for the 186.
Yep, I'm inclined to agree with that. Anybody else? Anybody not comfortable with that? Okay.
So I just want to I just want to make sure that I understand where we fall. Like, I've been studying this budget again, and it's 186,250 is for all of the monument restoration. 120,000 is for the fence assembly.
Yes.
And the where it says 245,000 in the column that says total project cost, that's actually the cost before they added in the contingency. So with the contingency, it came to 306,000. So I think that what I had included in the scenario spreadsheet was the correct numbers, 186,250 for monument restoration plus 120,000 for the fence. And so I think that the committee's decision is clearly going to be over whether to fund the entire project with the fence or only the monuments. And you wanted to ask one more time whether they were able to find an alternative source of funding for the fence, which I believe that they already indicated that they were not able to.
I think I mean, ultimately, if they told us that they couldn't get funding for the fence elsewhere, then I would personally be okay with paying for the fence as well. So I'm not really on the fence, haha, with that, but
I agree with that sentiment. We ranked the project our fourth. I mean, it was tied with three other projects, but definitely seems like a top priority. Doing like the Central Hill Memorial Project, there's really a lot of support for memorial restoration and building memorials in Somerville. It definitely hits a certain group of people. So I think this is a good value for our dollar.
Now, while I'm supportive of this project, I would say that with it being tied with other, with like, the prioritization activity that we did, right? With it being tied with other projects, I'm just wondering how that would affect our ability to fund other projects that we still have to review. Is there any way that we can fund like that like 182 first and then revisit this after discussing the other projects? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Roberta, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's any reason we couldn't do that. You know,
You could,
as go ahead.
I would strongly encourage you to vote on this project tonight, but if you wanted to vote on other projects first before coming back to it, there's no reason you couldn't hold this until after.
didn't we start off by saying that we could fund everything and still have 180 or 830 left in our budget?
That was my understanding. Yes.
Well, that changes. Eric, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
For some
I think
reason, yeah, okay, cool. Say no more.
okay.
Thanks, Eric. Okay. Well, I'm hearing that maybe we've got a little firmer understanding of the budget here and that folks are more amenable to funding this in full. And with the splits as recommended in Roberta's draft decision. Anybody not comfortable with going the full 306,000 on this if we were to take a vote? Okay. With that, I would invite a motion if anybody would like to make one.
Ryan, I'm happy to make that motion to fund this project in full.
Thank you, John. Can I have a second?
I'll second
Second
it.
that motion, yeah.
Carlos.
Well, let's give it to Carlos, Roberta.
Yeah,
All right.
Tie goes to Carlos.
All right.
I'll
Thank you.
third it.
I will call the roll.
Sorry,
Yes.
Roberta, before we vote, I just want to understand the delineation here on the upper part versus the middle. There's like a 237 versus 306. I just want to make
Yes.
sure whatever I'm voting on,
Sure. Thank you. That's a good point. So the recommendation letter shows that you will be voting. Actually, it shows that you're going to take two votes. So the first vote would be to appropriate 237,250 from the undesignated fund balance to the Historic Preservation Reserve. And then a second vote to award the full 306,250 CPA funds from the Historic Preservation Reserve. So the first vote is because the Historic Preservation Reserve needs to be boosted from the undesignated fund balance to get to the 306,000. So the motion that John just made and Carlos seconded to fund this project, I could assume that that goes to the first of the votes, and then we can take a second motion for the second vote.
Understood. Does that work for you, John, who made the motion?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Roberta, please call the roll.
All right. Carlos,
Aye.
Eric,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Rona,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
David,
Yes.
and Ryan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Okay, let's go on. What's the next one?
Oh, sorry, we need one more vote on this
Oh,
project.
my fault. I'm
That's
sorry,
all right.
Roberta. My fault. Could I have a motion then for addressing the second item within this recommendation to award $306,250 of historic preservation reserve to the Veterans Memorial Cemetery?
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Eric. In a second.
I can second that.
All right,
Thank you,
you.
John.
I'll call the roll. David,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Rona,
Yes.
Joe, John,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yep.
Eric,
Yes.
and Ryan.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you. Sorry about that. And end of a long day. My brain. Okay. Let's see. Our next item on the agenda will be
Blessing
Blessing
of
of
the
the Bay.
Bay. So Blessing of
Blessing.
the Bay, we have a very late breaking change in this project. They had originally requested, sorry, I'm looking for it on the sheet. They had originally requested 347,178, and that was updated this week. They were able to adjust the budget, pull money from other sources, and the final request is 124,331.
Well then.
Okay.
All right. Very good. Thank you. And the numbers that I was quoting a couple minutes ago already did include that change, I realized, because I was using
Okay.
Roberta's math, which already reflected that. So but thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so this is 1/3 almost the original ask. Maybe we should just wait another couple months and it'll no. Okay.
I do have a quick question, actually, kind of not ironically about that. Where exactly is this project? Because I was just on a site visit for one of the Blessing of the Bay projects, which is going to be affected by the city's sewer.
The MROS
separation
project you're speaking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Is this the same?
similar. It is the Shore Drive and DCR portion of the land. There is that extent of it, but the project kind of ends where this new sewer outfall is
So
gonna
this
begin.
so the proposed stormwater outfall won't affect this this
This
pro
this project, no, I don't believe so. There might have to be some little phasing things, but that's something that's all being coordinated between the two project managers, like the engineering project manager and the PSF project manager, Meg.
Okay.
Um,
So I just didn't want to throw more money at this if it's all going to be torn up when they put in this
no, yeah,
stormwater pipe.
that whole phasing has been coordinated between the two.
Okay.
That was a
All
good
right.
question.
Anybody else with discussion topics for this parks project? I believe this was a pretty straightforward application when it came in. Roberta, the materials, and you'll forgive me for not revisiting what's in there, but does it show, now that we're down to $124,000 in the request, where specifically these dollars will be spent?
Yes, there's a new budget that's included in um, the application form that's in your meeting packet now.
Okay, I'm
Um,
looking at it right now. So
yeah,
looks like it
so
is lighting and electrical. I mean, it's small amounts in each of these lines. Lighting and electrical, site furnishings, planting soils and mulch, trees, plant maintenance and warranty, and then a contingency and administrative fees. So it's just obviously a subset of what the previous request was. Um, yeah, looks clear to me. Okay.
So I
Go
did
on, Rebecca.
add to the recommendation letter a funding condition that has not been a part of this project in the past, but copying from the funding condition that you've added to the Kennedy Schoolyard project, a requirement that if the park is subject to a change in use which reduces or eliminates the open space, the open outdoor recreation space within 50 years of the approval of this grant, the funds will be required to be returned to the open space reserve unless the Community Preservation Committee consents to allow the city to retain the funds.
Understood.
Where did you pull that? Where did we other hear about
The
that?
last couple of times we've given grants for the Kennedy Schoolyard, we included this
Okay.
funding condition because the schoolyard does not have any permanent open space protection
Yep.
as other parks and playgrounds do. And this is a similar situation where the area that's being improved does not have a permanent
Yeah.
open space
Yeah. It actually
designation.
probably should be included in all the open space because they're all subject to what is it, Article
Article
97?
97.
Yeah.
They
They're all protected.
most of them are subject to Article 97, but there are a few exceptions, and this is one of them.
But I guess my point was under Article 97, the city could apply for open space to be converted to another use.
They could.
So so I guess I was making the case. It may be good language to have in all cases to protect, the our money, if not the resource, from a change in use.
Yeah, if that's the case, that might be something that we could consider over the summer if we reevaluate our memoranda of agreement for projects after this funding round.
Yeah, I'm not sure there are any on this funding cycle that this would be a concern for.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion on this one?
Yeah, since I'm playing parliamentary procedure rule keeper tonight, Roberta, can you explain why this one doesn't have the 2 vote scenario?
Because this is drawing from the budgeted reserve, which you are allowed to draw directly from the budgeted reserve. With the undesignated fund balance, we're required to put it into a reserve account first.
Perfect, thank you.
I think if I'm remembering right, Roberta, you just kind of did what we've often done in 2 steps in 1 step with this past part. I think in other years we've made decisions outside of any specific project to reallocate money, into the applicable fund. And then, and we didn't do it in the context of specific projects. Am I remembering that incorrectly?
When you do the budget at the beginning of the year, it's, and you do the budget by percentage, that's outside of the context of specific projects. But later, if we use the undesignated fund
Right.
balance, we typically will pull it because of specific projects.
Okay, I kind of thought, yes, I agree, but I think we still did it as a standalone action.
Yeah,
And it said, yeah, we need to move this money so that we can subsequently, give it to this project.
yeah. I don't recall if it was done exactly the
Yeah,
same way,
that's fine.
but it was a similar
Yeah.
purpose.
Okay, So it sounds like hopefully we're clear now on the actual language. Any further discussion? And if not, I would welcome a motion for this one.
Yeah, I can motion to fund this project in full.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Eric.
I'll call the roll. David,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Rona,
Yes.
Joe. We're having a hard time hearing you, Joe. John,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Yes?
Carlos,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you
All
all.
right. Thank you very much. Okay, just looking ahead through the agenda as we have 15 minutes left here, we have at the end the annual review for the fiscal year 26 funding round. Roberta, I think we had discussed that this could potentially float to the next meeting. Do you agree with that?
Annual review can float to the next meeting. There was one subject that I did want to raise with the committee regarding the annual review, though, which technically we can do that next month. So yeah, we can hold off on that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So that will give us hopefully time to run through one more. The next on the agenda is the Beta Real building on Broadway, the request for $150,000 for historic preservation work. Anyone with questions, comments, or feelings about this application?
This was the stained glass window work primarily, wasn't it? Or let
The
me-
non-religious stained glass. Yes.
Okay, yes.
I've learned new things in this one.
Did they change it to roof?
Other way around.
No,
Oh, okay. Roof went to the non-religious stained glass windows. Yes.
they
Yeah.
chose it as their top priority.
Yeah.
For preservation.
And these were the Tiffany windows that were discovered.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, perfect, Roberta. And this would be funded straight from the Historic Preservation Reserve, one source. Generally standard funding conditions here, I believe.
Just only standard.
Got it. Okay. Anybody with any issue, question, comment on this as drafted?
I support this. I think it's worthwhile. It's an important art, historic resource to have there. It's visible from the outside. It's important that we keep those alive and well.
Yeah, I just have a question. What happened to the roof? Did they fix it already?
No. So they did submit to us last year. We funded a condition assessment, and they submitted the condition assessment report prepared by their historic preservation architect, who identified different priorities of work that need to be done on the building. And the architect had identified the windows as the highest priority, but the applicant didn't understand the eligibility and thought that the windows would not be eligible. So they moved on to the second priority on the list. And then I met with the applicant and helped them to understand that the windows, they specifically had identified eligible windows in the report for the $150,000 recommended project. So that's the applicant opted or requested to switch to the windows as their highest priority.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, Rona, you're operating on with limited information here.
Yeah, I'm trying. The thing I read said roof, so
Yeah.
so I'll catch up as fast as I can.
No, you're doing fine. Thank you.
Yeah. It is a little tricky. If you go into about page 2 or 3 of the application, there's like a letter where they say, we changed our mind. Now we understand we could, the windows are eligible.
It's
All
kind
right.
of funny splitting hairs. Like it can't go to religious imagery, but the entire building is religious imagery by design. It's like the form of it is a religious.
Nope.
It's kind of like
now we have to stick our fingers in our ears and go, nah, nah, nah.
yeah, right.
The city also holds a preservation restriction on the building, which means that the city has taken a real interest in the preservation of the entire building, regardless of its use.
That's a really good building there. Okay.
All right. Any last questions, comments here? All right. Hearing none, can I have a motion for this one?
So moved.
Thanks, Mary Jo. Second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Rona. Roberta, please call the roll.
All right. David,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Rona,
Yes.
Joe, John,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes.
Thank
for this
you
one.
very much. All right, so we're down to our final three, and we only have a couple of minutes left here, and I do want to approve our minutes from the last meeting. Do folks want to tackle the Mystic Open Space conversation, the request for a $50,000 from the Somerville Housing Authority? Are folks okay to dive in here, or let me rephrase, any objections to taking this on in the next couple of minutes? Hearing none. Okay, let's.
I actually, before I say none, I know, John, you had some concerns about the form of the application when it first came in regarding what they wanted to do.
I
Was
think I
that
just had
resolved?
questions about the artificial turf.
Right.
And
So
just mentioning that
so did they change
CPA.
that? Is it still in here or did they not?
No, all I was highlighting was that the CPA can't fund
They
the
can't fund
artificial
it.
turf, and that like we could fund probably the sub base and whatnot, but like the turf itself is
I don't
and then I
think we
did
can.
did
I don't
say
think we
I'm
can fund
happy
the
to
sub.
have.
I don't think we
Sorry.
can. I don't think we can fund the sub base either. Actually.
Oh, okay. And in a previous project in Falmouth, I know the CPA funded everything
Okay.
except the grass, so maybe it's a little different in each town.
Yeah.
But and then
I
all I
think they were
mentioned
called.
was to reach out to PSUF and specifically me if they had any questions related to the project. I would happily give them some insight. They never reached out, so didn't provide any information to them, but still more than happy to.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, though, if we fund this, that it's not funding, a component of artificial turf.
We can
Yeah.
include that as a condition.
Yeah, and they're still doing so much work with the garden beds.
Yep.
And the request is so low,
Yeah.
and the basketball
Yeah,
courts as
no,
well.
I mean, all that's fine. I just was recalling, that specific issue and just wanted to make sure that was resolved.
Yeah. Thanks.
I had a couple lingering questions about this one, and maybe folks on this committee can correct me or give me, more intel. I was confused about where specifically our 50,000 is going. I kind of heard this project as a pool of money to do X, Y, and Z on this space, and it wasn't really clear where the 50,000 number was coming from or going to specifically, because we heard about the basketball courts, we heard about flower beds, we heard or planting beds, we heard about, I think, the smaller like playground area further away from the main lawn. We heard about the main lawn itself being redone. Does anybody have any recollection of what specifically within this scope our dollars are going to?
I will share the screen. I pulled up their budget since you ask. And it's showing that the CPA funds would be used for 15,000 for study in architecture and 35,000 for site work. And I don't think they were any more specific than that.
Yeah. So
But,
go ahead, David.
well, I was thinking like a couple pages on is a table which is so small I'd have to make it much bigger. There. Does that shed any light on it?
Let's see.
Ah, got it.
You got that?
Just kidding.
That's what they call the small print.
This
Let's see.
is, I think,
No, I
This
don't
is
a
think.
good.
list of activities that
Yeah, okay.
take place.
Yeah. I mean, I remember you're right. I mean, I kind of agree with you, Ryan. I think that they kind of talked about a bunch of hypothetical things in their presentation.
Yeah.
It wasn't,
This is community engagement. That's what this is.
Yeah, this
okay.
is from one of the surveys they conducted with the residents.
Yeah.
So
But
that question, and then the other question that I can't remember if I asked it when they were there, or if it's kind of just outstanding still, is because they commented that the existing planting beds that they've had there in the community garden have fallen into disrepair, but they're the purview of the residents, which in general I think is a good thing. But I had asked, okay, if we're going to invest this money on behalf of the public, what how do we know it's not going to end up the same? Is there some sort of maintenance commitment or anything with teeth to it for the Somerville Housing Authority? I don't think we got a response on that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody saw otherwise. Stepping back, this is not a huge dollar ask. It's an applicant that I don't think I've seen in my couple of years here, so I'm excited to have them asking for this, and obviously they're worthwhile improvements. But I also want to make sure that we're, given that there apparently is a precedent of this type of investment kind of going by the wayside, I want to make sure that ours doesn't. So the combination of those two,
yeah.
for me, is just a question, I guess, to you all, my peers. Is that gray area worth us punting to get some more information, or am I the most worried among us? And we should go ahead on and consider this for its considerable merits.
No, I agree with you, Ryan. I definitely think the application isn't the best application we've seen, but the project itself is rooted in something that I think PSF specifically is very excited to see these projects that are open space related, but not on city-owned land, where the city can kind of have some way of kind of helping improve these open spaces. This is kind of one of those like great opportunities. So I'm really excited to see that. But yes, the application itself seems like it's a little bit of a feasibility study and then some quick implementations, but they're very vague on like what the implementations are actually going to be. So that I definitely think needs some more work or some more information on. But the project itself, it does excite me.
Thanks, John. I think that makes sense. I guess part of my question is, okay, we have this $50,000, 35,000 is for the actual improvements, and then there's $100,000 for the improvements that's coming from elsewhere. In the event that that doesn't materialize, does our 35,000 buy anything that they want? Is that enough? I imagine that it is, but that's the kind of clarity that um, I didn't think was there. But your point's well taken. I'm in agreement. Um, Anybody else with feelings on this?
Well, I'm wondering, once we give the grant, is there enough transparency for us to be able to know what they did with it? And do we have any leverage, over that if we don't think what we thought was going to happen happens?
I do have reporting forms, and since they're an outside organization, they would be submitting reporting forms with each request for a funding disbursement. That you know, I am not sure how closely, because very often the disbursement schedule that we set up with the outside organization has somewhat vague milestones, by necessity, because they don't have all of they don't know everything that's going to happen in what order at the time that they sign a contract with the city. So the usual vagueness tied to a project that typically is much more clearly defined allows for some flexibility in cash flow throughout the construction process. This is a bit different in that the uh, there's so little information that's given about what they're going to be doing, what the milestones would be. They have the option to just be reimbursed after the end of the project, which might be the most administratively simple way to go about it. But, we would certainly want to have reporting to know how they used the funds if it were, if it's not spelled out ahead of time.
So just to recap it, they're asking for a bunch of designer money and then some money that would presumably fund whatever the designer tells them to do.
Seems right.
Sorry, I just lost my
Right, but
you all.
but a little bit more specific. Well, I don't know because I'm not sure if it's in here, but a little more specific because they kind of told us, that they want to focus on the basketball courts and the garden and that little kind of triangular area, which may or may not be able to be artificial turf.
Yeah, I think I agree. If other than not wanting to fund things we're not allowed to fund, I can't picture a whole lot that they could do wrong with it. On the flip side, I mean, any improvement to the site, whether it's hardscape or plants, is good.
Well, Ryan's concerned that they don't get the other half of the money, I guess, is a potential.
Just using common sense, I think they should be able to do something with $35,000 based upon what they pitched.
Right.
But that's me making an assumption.
Right. So
is there any urgency to it?
That they do what they can do.
Right.
And that
urgency. I guess that's probably a question for Roberta. Have you heard anything about?
I vaguely heard some feedback about removal of community gardens, but I'm not entirely sure about that. I don't know, John, if you heard anything about removal of their community gardens. So they may be looking for a replacement of the community garden beds before the next season begins. But I'm not entirely sure about that.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay.
I kind of like the idea of giving them the ability to do whatever the consultant says they need to do if it's something that needs to take root in the spring, rather than tell them, well, you missed the window because, it's fall now or whatever. So I don't know if there are any ways to put conditions on the money, and then allow it as a lump sum, or just tell them to come back next month.
So in another community where I've worked, they have structured the grant agreements in such a way that the um, the development, so for example, with this project, the development of the design guidelines could be the first milestone, and that has to be completed and submitted to me and approved before the rest of the funds would be released. So I could work on developing that in the grant agreement, or we could even put that in the conditions, that the design guidelines will be approved and design guidelines and scope for site improvements will be approved. I'm going to share the screen so you can help me wordsmith.
Roberta, similar to that idea, could we also maybe consider funding the study now and both internally as a committee and then also signal to the applicant that we would be eager to take up the balance of their requests as an off-cycle review. I mean, these dollars aren't big, right? And this would allow them to even ask for a little bit more if they wanted to, if the report had enough detail and specificity. It looks like we're going to be well above our 750 target, so we've got a little bit of, slush here to support them even more potentially.
It makes a ton of sense to me, Michael. I think I'm hearing a lot of goodwill on this committee for this group and this proposal. And so issuing the $15,000 would demonstrate that. Go ahead and get started on the study, and we'd be happy to consider a request. Roberta, if it's kosher, to borrow David's word, maybe a revision of this already received applications. They don't have to send in a whole new application, just send clarifications for us to consider beyond the 15,000 in future months, just to reduce the administrative burden. I think that makes sense to me. Anybody with feelings otherwise?
It's already been established that I'm more trusting than you guys, but but I mean, I'm looking at the project description at the top of Roberta's letter, which is pretty prescriptive about what they have to use the money for. If you scroll up a little, and and since we're talking just the 50,000, 50,000 are only withholding 35,000, and we would, and they'd have to come to us for the money to do it. I'm just not sure. And I mean, I understand and hear everyone is saying about, how, the flaws in the application, and I think that's, but to me, this feels like kind of the sort of entity where, a helping hand is, and saying, we see what you're trying to do. We want to support what you're trying to do. In the future, these are ways you can strengthen your application process, but, but here maybe no harm, no foul. But again, maybe I'm being too,
No, I agree. I agree with everything you said, David. I think that makes a ton of sense. And you're right. I mean, if you look at the first page of the application, which is what you're referring to, they are clear about, they have basically three things. It's a menu of things that they're going to spend this money on.
Yeah.
After the study: scattered community raised garden beds, basketball court / site improvements. That's a little vague, but and playground equipment upgrades. All of those, to my knowledge, are eligible. And
right. The only thing they'd have to make sure they don't do is use it on artificial turf.
Yeah. So yeah, I can, with that refreshed knowledge, I think I can probably.
But again, I mean, other people have had views on this, so
yeah. Michael, since you were with me before on the study first, does that change your thinking at all, what David just pointed out?
I mean, there's a little voice in the back of my head that is just worried about, our responsibility to make sure we're thoughtful about every dollar spent. But again, these numbers aren't big enough. I think we, like you said earlier, want to show goodwill to this group. So I don't know if I've got a strong opinion.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else that would not be in support, not to make you vote before you vote, but that would not be on board with funding this with the conditions that we've talked about: no artificial turf, and a detailed scope to be provided before the funds come out? Okay. If that's the case, perhaps we can have a motion for this one.
right. I'll make a motion that we fund it with the described conditions.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will call the roll. Ryan,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Rona,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
David.
Yes.
All right.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, Roberta, if no objections from you, I think we can do as we've done before and approve the minutes at the next meeting, if that's all right, since we've gone over time here.
Yeah.
Anything else administratively you want to say before we make a motion to adjourn?
I just wanted to make a note. I think that I forwarded to committee members this week an announcement about an upcoming community meeting for planning of Art Farm. So that's really exciting to actually see Art Farm recreation area proceeding to the stage of community planning. So I would encourage you to learn more about the project and attend if you can.
Thank you. I do plan on going over there, so
Is that,
hopefully I'll see
I should
you there.
also mention that there is an upcoming tabling event that is going to be happening before the next time the committee meets. That is the Lunar New Year Festival, which is on Saturday, February 14. I'll send an announcement to everyone about that. I will be there. I would love to have company from a committee member if you're able to join me at the event. It is optional. So it would be fun to see you there, and I'll give you more information.
where is it?
It- Where is it? I believe it's at the high school, but that's actually a really good question. I need to check on that to make sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okie doke. Thanks, Roberta. All right, with
What are
that,
the, well, what
go
are the
ahead.
tabling hours? I'm sorry.
I will give
You'll
you
you'll
that.
figure that
Yeah,
out.
I'll
Okay.
follow that up. I need to check the details.
Thanks, Rona. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn? All right. Thanks for bearing with us, gang. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
And a second.
Second that.
Thank you.
All right, and I will call the roll. Michael,
Aye.
Ryan,
Yes.
Rona,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
and Mary Jo.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone?
I don't
All
think
right.
so.
My list was jumping around while I was reading it. Thank
No
you
worries.
all. Good meeting.
Thanks,
Thank
gang.
you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All
Good night.
Wrong month.